Hi, welcome to episode 135 of Fresh Air at 5. In this podcast, you're going to hear me talk about leadership, about student care, about classroom stuff, about, my learning that I've done. And I think it's important that we know that, this job is hard. It's not an easy thing, but it's so worthwhile. Did some Pro D earlier this week. It was pretty cool. This episode spans 2 weeks. Got back from our kayaking trip that you can listen to in episode 134 and have a shoulder injury at this point. My rotator cuff muscles are all messed up and it's still very painful, but that slowed me down in being able to get out for my morning walk. Thus, a 2-week episode, all boiled down into one episode here. So I didn't walk every day, had to get some rest. Okay, I can keep going on, but you should now listen to episode 135 of Fresh Air at 5.
I'm Chris Nesi, host of Behind the Mic, Voices of the EPN, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now. Shows on the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Welcome to Fresh Air at 5, the podcast. I'm your host, Brian Carpenter. Fresh Air at 5 is my regular attempt to exercise by walking about my neighborhood, to take in podcast content, then reflect in an unedited video, which I finally post to my Twitter channel. This podcast will be a regular collection of the audio from these selfie videos. You can follow me on Twitter at Fresh Air at 5 or check out my website, briancarpenter.com, for other content I have created and collected.
Hey, PLN, August 23, 2023. It's the first day I've been out for a Fresh Air at 5 walk in a while. Partly because I was on vacation last week, and where I was, I didn't have the space to go for a walk because we were on a little island in the Pacific Ocean and enjoyed vacation. We went on a kayaking trip. Hey, if you want to check out and listen to what we did and what we saw on episode 134 of Fresh Air at 5 that just dropped, I think, on Monday, I did audio recordings each day of my reflections of the day, what we did, and some laughs that we had. And you can go check that out on episode 134 of Fresh Air at 5. So that is not my regular reflection method of listening to podcasts and bringing you this content that I typically do on the daily, as well as at the end of every week. But it is a good thing to listen to, and I'm thankful for everybody that's listened already, and you could go listen to that as well. All right, so vacation was fantastic. I'm not going to talk about that because you can go listen to that on episode 134. If I keep talking about it here, you won't go listen. All right, yeah. All right, so that's, I'm going to stop talking about my vacation. We did have a great time. We did go kayaking and spent 6 nights out in the wild. Fantastic. All right, I am this morning privileged to bring you episode 231 of House of Ed Tech. It's Chris Nesi has an ISTE live conversation with Alfonso Mendoza of My Ed Tech Life, and they talk about podcasting, they talk about AI, they talk about a lot of things, but in a way that doesn't seem overwhelming. Fonz has the My Ed Tech Life podcast. I was fortunate to be a guest on his show back a while ago, and it was fantastic to connect with him. He has such a smooth way of delivering, and it's important for us to hear what he has to say. So if you haven't listened to that, go subscribe to My Ed Tech Life. 1 second, I'll be right back. One more thing for August 23, 2023. Continuing my thoughts on House of EdTech, episode 231, with Alfonso Mendoza being the guest from ISTE Live 2023 that Chris talked to there when he was there in Philly. They talked about AI. They talked about how, we have this opportunity with a tool before us that, you know, sometimes can scare us. When I was in shop in grade 7, 8, and 9, the table saw sat in the middle of our wood shop class. It was a tool that the teacher said, nobody touch that. Don't touch it because it's dangerous. And you know what? It is dangerous. It's super dangerous. I never touched that table saw the whole time that I was there. If any wood needed to be ripped, Mr. Robinson would take and do that for us and give us the wood as a result of him cutting it. But we weren't allowed to touch it. Why? He was nervous and scared that we would hurt ourselves. Well, we're sitting here with this table saw that's got big teeth on it in the middle of the room. Well, actually, it's not a table saw, but it's AI. And we need to take a look at this and not be scared of it. You know, he had us all scared. He had us all nervous. But you know what? That is a fear way to approach new learning. And AI is not going away. It's integrated in many of the tools that we actually use, like Canva and Adobe Express and other many tools that maybe we're not even thinking about. But we didn't hear about ChatGPT until last November. That has affected the way we are approaching things. Over my vacation, I read most of Matt Biller's book, AI in Education. I think that's what it's called. Just came out in the spring. And I think it would be important for you to take a listen to that book and read that book as well. Fonz has a lot of great things to say on his podcast about AI, and it's important for us to not be afraid of it. We have to be cautious. We have to be respectful. I am respectful of the table saw that sits in my garage today because it can do some damage if it's not used properly. All right, there's my table saw analogy and a story from my past. Thank you so much, Chris. Thank you so much, Fonz. And we talk about podcasting. And yes. All right, we'll talk to you soon. Okay, bye. One more thing for August 23, 2023. Listening to episode 68 of Evolving with Gratitude. Lainey Rowell has on guest Marissa Thompson, who brings us a perspective on gratitude and about dealing with negativity bias that is so important for you to hear. I encourage you to go listen to this episode because I believe it'll make a difference for you as you look at how you approach challenges and difficulty. The gratitude part is about taking stock of situations and looking at the little moments. It's great to hear you, Marissa, talk about how you've approached this in the past and writing notes and things like that. And now in your role, how you see that you can support teachers to be better teachers so that they can care for their kiddos in their classroom spaces. Lainey, thanks so much for your podcast. I so much appreciate it. I missed it last week as I was away on vacation, kayaking, but I am back now, and I'm glad that I could listen to you and Marissa talk. So, if you haven't subscribed to Evolving with Gratitude, I want you to stop right now, press pause, and I want you to go over and I want you to subscribe to Evolving with Gratitude. Then come on back, because I got one more thing to say here right now. Did you subscribe? Did you subscribe to Lainey's podcast? I really hope so. All right. One more thing that I got to say is that I'm a part of the Educational Podcast Network with Chris Nesi, and we are a group of podcasters of like-mindedness in the way that we come together as podcasters and support and show off each other's podcasts. You can go over to the Educational Podcast Network and check out all the different shows that are there. As of September 1st, there's a new podcast on the scene called Behind the Mic, Voices of the EPN, the Educational Podcast Network. And Chris has taken upon himself with us to have conversations about how did we get started, where are we from, what's our background, and you can go and check out who we are as podcasters. Take a listen. Okay, bye. Hey, PLN, August 24, 2023. Welcome to Thursday. It is early in the morning, and this morning, honestly, I didn't want to get out of bed, but because of discipline and consistency in the small things, I got out of bed, and here I am, and I am bringing you my thoughts of an epic book review that I heard as George Couros talks with Jimmy Cassis on Innovators Mindset podcast about Jimmy's book that was released back in 2017 called Culturize. And I have heard the title, Jimmy and George, but I have not read the book. And I do appreciate very much this morning as you guys talk about it and talk about the 4 pillars of Culturize. And just reviewing for myself, we have being a champion for kids, being excellent, carrying the banner, and being a merchant of hope. And those are 4 statements about behavior in an organization and for a leader to consider as they are moving forward and what's going on in the culture of an organization. So we talk about the culture of a school and how do we know the culture of a school? Do we see the vision statement on the wall? We might do that. This is what I'm listening to this morning. Then we might see the vision statement, but is it being walked around? You know, does the vision statement need to be on the wall for students to know what the vision of the school is? You know, or the values of the teacher, right? What does the teacher value? Do we have to write those on the wall so students know those? Or do they see those things in the actions and words of the teacher? The leaders in your school. Now, this isn't speaking just of administration. This is talking about all of us as leaders in our classrooms. What do we do and how do we raise the bar of excellence? How do we have kids leave our space carrying our banner? You know, how do we, bring hope to students? And Jimmy, I appreciate the story you talked about Ben. Fantastic. I've got a Ben story myself in my world. So yes, maybe one day I'll share that. Appreciate it. Have a great day, guys. Okay, bye. Hey, the last thing for August 25, 2023. Actually, it's 24, 2023. I'm listening to episode 1 of season 4 of Mindset Monday on the Innovators Mindset podcast. Today is George Day. I got an interview with Jimmy Cassis about the Epic Book Review first that just happened. I reviewed that and talked about that in the previous segment. And now I'm listening to Mindset Monday, and I'm a big fan of Mindset Mondays, and I've been since season 1, episode 1 that happened, I think probably 2 years ago or 3 years ago, George. And I appreciate the effort that you're putting into bringing content on a regular basis. That is so important. Today's topic that I listened to that came out at the beginning of August, on August 6th, you can go find that episode of Innovators Mindset, season 4, episode 1, Mindset Monday, is that, what is your effort when no one's watching? You know, we talk about putting in effort and doing what we do, but when no one's watching, how much effort do you put in? You know, are you sitting on the couch or are you actually out there getting at it? And this morning I ran into a guy. He's a heavy equipment operator as I'm on my walk this morning. And he's like, I see you walking, every day as I'm driving up here. And he was sitting by a park and having a cigarette and not judging him, just saying this is what I saw. And he's like, how do you do that every day? I'm like, I just have to get out, and it's small steps. It's the consistency. It's the consistent moments of getting out of bed in the morning, getting out on the street and putting it in. And George, you agree with me on this, that you have to put that effort in. This is what I heard you say when no one's watching. I have this thing about just-in-time learning, and I talk about just-in-time learning. We need to learn something. I talk about that with my students, and we don't need to learn everything ahead of time, but there is a place for being proactive in our learning and learning stuff before I need to know how to do that. I like the analogy and how you talked about your math class in middle school and high school and how you taught math, but you push the students to do better. All right, thanks, George. Appreciate it. Take a listen to this episode. Okay, bye. The last thing for August 24, 2023. I'm not done. Still talking about effort when no one's watching, and this is why I picked my camera back up. You know, as I walk and do Fresh Air at 5 in the morning, I see people that are just amazed at, oh, Brian, you can get up and do that. You know, I have made it public that I do get up and get out for my walks in the morning by having some accountability for myself. If I'm just doing stuff for myself, my own personal accountability isn't strong enough at moments, and this is just me being honest, that I struggle with my own personal accountability to myself, that I have to make it a little bit more public so it matters and people are watching. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing right now. That's why I'm recording this last segment right now this morning, is because I gotta say that, fresh air at 5 walks in the morning, who sees me doing that? Maybe Bruce, Ed, this guy that I just met today, but who sees me, and what's the point of that? The point is that I have a better day. My mind is clearer. I have more energy. I can care for my family, and if I don't get out and do my walk that no one else is seeing me do, it affects a whole lot of things in my day. So go out and be a better you. Be better you. Don't just say you're going to be a better you. Get out and actually do that and be a better you as you go through your day. All right. Thanks, George. Appreciate the prompting this morning. And I hope that I'm prompting you, if you're watching this on the daily, on Twitter, on X, that you will be inspired to be a better you today. Okay, bye. Good morning, PLN. It is August 28, 2023. Fresh air at 5 this morning in the dark. I actually got at it early this morning, and I'm thankful for that because I've got a full day ahead and need to get up. My son's got up for work. He's out the door already, and here I am up in the highlands above my house and getting some exercise in, getting some learning in this morning, and it's fabulous. We've had smoke here. So this is the Monday edition of Fresh Air at 5, but this is not the first episode or first segment of episode 135. Last week, we got back from our paddling trip that you may be aware of, and as a result of that, I sustained a rotator cuff inflammation and injury. It didn't damage my rotator cuff, but paddling and that repetitious, paddling work that you have to do when you're kayaking aggravated a pre-existing injury in my shoulder. So I was in so much pain last week, and also with the air quality, I decided not to work on the podcast on Thursday and Friday. Stayed in bed, rested, and I'm doing much better now. I'm actually holding my phone with the arm that was injured. So, yes, that being said, it's important to take care of yourself. It wasn't the fact that the paddling was too hard. It's just that it was too long for what I was used to. So, endurance in this is important, and that's something I'm going to work on in the future. And probably training so that that injury doesn't flare up when we're out on the water and I need to paddle like crazy. All right, that being said, I'm going to share with you my thoughts this morning on the Tom Schimmer podcast, episode 108, titled Acts As If, for his mindset moment, talking about relationships, for learning, and levels to percentage. So this is a fantastic episode, Tom, and people, take a listen. Come on right back right away. Hang on. One more thing for August 28, 2023. The Tom Schimmer podcast, episode 108, has Tom bring us a mindset moment where he talks about act as if in a mindset way, as opposed to, I don't know if it's ever going to happen. So it has to do with our predisposition to positivity compared to negativity. It has to do with our mindset about what we want and whether or not we are maybe visualizing or working through the feelings of something happening before they get there. An example of this is when I go fly fishing, I have already had success in the past, and I approach a lake considering and thinking about catching a fish. Every cast I make, I anticipate catching a fish. And what happens? Eventually, I catch a fish. You know, it's so simple in that way. If you don't have a hook in the water, you're not going to catch a fish. But it's about how you approach delivering that hook to the water and what you're doing with it that has to do with your response to the situation when it happens. Okay, that's pretty simple. But when we're talking about leadership at school, we're talking about opportunities we have in our profession. It goes the same way. I think there's a whole lot of tie-ins between the things that we're passionate about and the things that we have to do that we are passionate about. You know, our positions and professions and passions and our personal life is a whole lot of mixed up, as we learned about from Bounce Like a Pirate from Sarah Johnson. But we have to be mindful that our overall mindset about moving forward, our predisposition for being joyful and being a learner and those kinds of things will greatly affect the outcome. Thanks, Tom. I agree with you. So important that we have that under control before we get there. All right, coming right back. I got more to say. Hang on. One more thing for August 28, 2023. The Tom Sherman Podcast, 108 episodes in. Tom talks in his main part. He doesn't have an interview this time. He talks about the value of relationships through learning, not the relationships for learning or the relationships besides learning or relationships versus learning. So important that we get where we stick the relationships and learning together. You know, I like, Tom, how you talked about the versus mentality that we have in education. We have intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. We have, you know, learning versus teaching. And it's not like that. Life is not like that. We know that life's not like that. We know that there's a blend. We know that there is a blended learning going on. You know, we can't just have digital learning and then non-digital learning in our world today. It's a whole lot of blended learning. I need to learn how to do something about my vehicle. What do? I hit YouTube, because that's the digital space where there's a whole lot of information that I can learn about how to do something. So, the whole point of relationships for learning, or through learning, is about how we work alongside students and support them and make sure that our assessments are fair and reasonable, as opposed to hammering students and then, wondering how, soccer was, so that we could leverage our relationship to, motivate students. It has to do with how we exist in our teaching space and what do we do with assessment. All right. Tom says more than that and says better than I. So go take a listen to what Tom has to say. In the last segment, Tom brings us what to me is such an important conversion factor about changing performance scales to percentages, which is something that needs to happen here in British Columbia. And as we're moving into, secondary, needing to use proficiency scales, this is an important discussion. Thanks, Tom. Appreciate it. And with that, I'm going to call it done for talking about Tom this morning. Talk to you guys later. Have a great day. Okay, bye-bye. The last thing for August 28, 2023. So encouraging this morning to be out for fresh air at 5. So, that fresh air, that walking exercise, so good. And I'm thankful that I was able to get out. This morning, as I turned on Tech Tools for Teachers, I heard my voice. And thanks, Shanna, for including my bumper at the beginning of your episode. That is season 6, episode 1, as you bring us a back to school tech episode. And it's so good to hear your voice and your enthusiasm. And Fuzz, thanks for being the producer and part of the Tech Tools for Teachers podcast, as you bring some fun with Shanna and you guys bring the energy. So very good. If you're not listening to Tech Tools for Teachers, I would encourage you to do so. Shanna is a partner podcast in the Educational Podcast Network, and there's a number of other great podcasts that you can listen to there. Eventually, we'll hear Shanna's voice probably on Behind the Mic, a new podcast that is starting this Friday that is coming out of the Educational Podcast Network with Chris Nesi as the host. So, without further ado, let's jump into season 6, episode 1 of Tech Tools for Teachers. Shanna and Fuzz bring us Canva for education, and as an opportunity to have the inhibited Canva and a place that you can have your students work in the education space in Canva. You can sign up for Canva for Education. Take a look at that. If you need more information about getting hooked up with your district on that, I would refer you to Scott Nunes of Canva. So that is Mr. Scott Nunes. You can find him on Twitter, Nunes, and he works for Canva, a buddy of mine, and would encourage you to touch base with him. Shanna, you bring us also QR.io as a quick and easy QR code generator, and I really like QR codes. I'm going to start using them more as well in my school space. Finally, fontspaces.com is awesome. Then I need to check it out because I've got a Cricut, restrictions on what fonts I can use and stuff like that, and that's great. Have a fabulous day. Talk to you guys later. Bye. PLN August 30, 2023. We are getting down to the last days of August here in 2023, which means that the school year for this guy's ramping up and getting going, and I'm already starting to get my teacher mindset back on and looking at what I'm going to have to do next week, and already starting to plan how to approach Tuesday when we have a staff meeting, and then all the things that have to happen quickly and efficiently so that we can be up and running, so that as we welcome students into our teaching space, it happens. My school, the virtual school, it's a different kind of school. It's a different environment, but there's a lot of the same things that have to happen in a bricks and mortar school. Getting lists of students, getting class lists, figuring out who needs what, all those things. But as we approach that, I listened to episode 82 this morning of Science 360 podcast with Tim Stevenson. Tim's a friend of mine, lives in the next town over, and teaches at Walnut Grove Secondary. And if you haven't listened to Science 360, I would encourage you to do so. Tim brings some challenging conversations to the front and to the fore that we need to pay attention to here in education. We say that we need to bring 21st century skills to our students. And does that mean that we teach them the 19th century skills of arithmetic and reading and literacy and all those things? Or are those things important? And they very much are. In episode 82, he talks with Dr. Tim Daisy, who is a former MIT researcher and thought leader in the area of wisdom factories. That's the name of his book. And he brings all these things together to challenge us to consider how we will affect how we teach and what we teach our students. Am I teaching media design to my students so that I can have them mimic what happens in the New York Times? Or am I teaching them media design skills so that they can be effective communicators in the future? And I have to figure out how to do that better than I do. We got some good things going on, but we got to do them better. All right, take a listen to this episode. Thanks so much, Tim. And Tim, talk to you soon. Bye. Hey PLN, it is September 1, Friday, September 1st, 2023. Can you believe it? We are now on the verge here in where I live of the 2023-2024 school year. Many have already gone back in the States, in the southern states, places like that, and other places around the world. But here where I am, school's about to start on Tuesday after Labor Day, and I'm excited about it. I am also not part of me is like, I wish I had longer for summer. I did teach summer session this year, and that was a choice that I made. Wasn't forced upon me, but I did it, and I'm glad I did because I got to work with a number of great students this summer, get them through Chemistry 11 and Chemistry 12. Got others that are still working on it, and that's all right because that's what our education opportunity at my school allows us to do. All right, this morning I listened to the brand new podcast. It's a new to me podcast because it's episode 1 of this podcast called Behind the Mic, Voices of the Educational Podcast Network. And I am a member of the Educational Podcast Network with Chris Nesi, the founder, and this past summer, him and we actually chatted, and my episode is coming up on episode 4 of Behind the Mic, and I'm excited to actually listen to our conversation again because I see what I said. But in this podcast, we're going to hear the voices and the other educators that are part of our Education Podcast Network. And in episode 1, we hear from the podcast hosts Jen and Ann of Transparency and Teaching Stuff. Transparency and Teaching Stuff. And you have to listen to this episode to hear why and how they started it out, why they talk about the things that they do, the reality of education and teaching and expectations on teachers, and just that opportunity for them to get their voice out there to share with you as educators. So take a listen. New teachers, take a listen to this. You got your opinion to say? Do so. All right, that's it. Take a listen to the Education Podcast Network, and that's it. Thanks, bye. Okay, one more thing for September 1, 2023. I wasn't done because I ran out of time watching the clock, and I have more to say about the Education Podcast Network's new podcast, Behind the Mic, with host Chris Nesi and guests in episode 1 from the podcast Transparency and Teaching Stuff with Ann and Jen. So the reality of this thing about education, and how can we share our thoughts about it, and policies and things that affect us as educators and the jobs that we can do. Ann and Jen dive right into that and talk about the heavy and hard. There is some explicit language in this that I understand, so be mindful of that as you listen. So just I'm telling you that up front for the listener, because sometimes this stuff is so raw. We just gotta get the beep out there so that we can share our thoughts. All right, Ann and Jen, great to hear from you, and thanks for being part of the EPN, and it's great to have a collective of other podcasters around that we know and care about. All right, happy days. Okay, bye-bye. One more thing for September 1, 2023. I just listened, and I'm in the process of listening to, because I haven't finished, episode 69 of Evolving with Gratitude with Lainey Rowell, as she has on guest Josh Stamper of the Teach Better team. And Josh is a leader, Teach Better team, and a father of 6, and a husband, and been an educator for a long time, and has an immense amount of wisdom about how to do this thing. He's got a podcast called Aspire to Lead. He has a book by the same title that he wrote, and I can't remember, Josh, which one came first, but it doesn't matter. You've been at this Aspire to Lead journey for about 5 years or so, and you're making a difference in schools and people's lives as a result of that. Lainey and Josh get into a big part of what Josh does. This is Josh's second time being on the Evolving with Gratitude podcast. Episode 14 was his first. I probably did listen to that back about a couple of years ago, or a year ago or so. So that's episode 14. And then today, episode 69 that I'm listening to this week, Josh talks about trauma-informed teaching and about trauma-informed relationships, and the relationships action team at his school about looking at student behavior. And as he was a vice principal, he was a dean of students, he was responsible for student discipline and all those things that go along with that role. And he talks about how understanding that trauma is a real part of students' lives can help us with a different perspective of approaching them in a disciplinary way. It's about the whole child. It's about what's going on outside of school. And, when you come to our house, we are going to be the trusted adults that are going to care for you when you come to our house. All right. Thanks so much, Josh. Thanks so much, Lainey. Fantastic. Take a listen to episode 69, Evolving with Gratitude. All right, the last thing for September 1, 2023. This is the end of my vacation day for the summer. School starts on Tuesday after we have Labor Day. We've got a fun-filled, packed weekend ahead. Got a wedding to attend, a hike to go on with our family. I've got a project I'm working on with my mom and dad at their place, putting drawers in their pantry cupboard. They had a series of about 7 shelves, and my mom was like, Brian, do you think we could go to IKEA and go get some drawers? And I'm like, Mom, we can go to IKEA, but those are really expensive, and I can build them and do them better for what your needs are. So I jumped into a design challenge and looked at what's available from IKEA. I looked at what's available and how I can use some different tools and techniques that I've done before. I looked at some wood and how to build a drawer. I've never built a drawer before for a cabinet, and doing some cabinetry work. I've done a smidge of that in my workshop, in my wood shop, but this past week I jumped into that, built 8 drawers, put on glide rails on them, and I'm doing the painting now, the finishing part, and I'm about to deliver the complete project to my mom and dad. I've been over at their house, and it's been super awesome that my dad's last name is Carpenter like mine, and he says the Carpenter stops at the end of the letter R, and he doesn't do carpentry. So it was really cool for him to come and hang out with me in the shop, in my garage there, here at our house, and to be able to work with me. So you know what? A highlight of my summer was the fact that I did this project with my dad right now. We've got some other highlights from the summer, and I've talked about those in the past. You can go back and listen to episode 134, which is a super awesome highlight, and other things prior to that. All right, this is it for summer vacation 2023. And I'm super excited about getting back to the work and seeing our students and watching learning happen. Have a fabulous day. I will. Okay, bye.
As my one word for 2021 is appreciate, I appreciate you giving me a listen as I've created this podcast experience for you. It's a unique Blinkist or Coles Notes version of the content I take in, like a highlight reel, so that you can hopefully find other interesting podcasts you may not have considered before. I've recorded the specific podcast episodes in the show notes for your learning convenience. Please subscribe so you don't miss any of my upcoming episodes. And if you enjoy this podcast and its format, share it with someone else. Tweet about your experience or give it a review on Apple Podcast or wherever you listen to podcasts. Fresh Air at 5 can also be found on Voice Ed Radio. Your voice is right here, and on the Education Podcast Network, podcasts for educators, podcasts by educators. I hope you have a fantastic day and get some fresh air before the day is out, and take care of yourself because you're worth it.